Hello, Brother Sean again. It's video 7. It's the final scenario of Mrs. Doyle and Father Ted. And this final episode is focusing more on Mrs. Doyle gathering her thoughts, her belongings, drawing a line in the sand at all her foibles, her mistakes, her sorrows, her heartache. And the morning arrived in the presbytery, where Mrs. Doyle had her 2 suitcases packed, a few sandwiches for the long journey to Dublin, and then on to England. And she said goodbye with a tear in her eye to the 3 men that she'd slaved over for best part of 15 years. She'd had lots of happy memories, but latterly she'd had a lot of sad memories with the lies and the misunderstandings and the judgmental attitudes towards her for daring to speak her truth, to step out of her comfort zone as a Catholic Christian and embrace other faiths. And the 3 men stood there realizing they'd never find another like Mrs. Doyle. Well, sure, now Mrs. Doyle will be bidding you farewell. May the road bless you as you go along. May you know peace and happiness. And thanks for all you've done for us. And let's hope we can get someone to replace you, because we're going to die of starvation in the process. So she thought, I'm not rising to that, and she got in her little horse-drawn buggy. And off she went, and she looked back and she waved, and she said goodbye to that part of her life that had held her in bondage, slavery to ego. And you know what? She felt a sudden feeling of childlike warmth. She was embracing her inner child. And as she arrived at the station, there was a posse of the women from the village who'd heard that she was leaving. And they were really more looking for gossip than they were to wish her well. Ah, Mrs. Doyle, you won't find anything like what you had up there. There's women in our village and they'd scratch their eyes out what you had. So she retorted and said, well, let them scratch their eyes out, pet. I'm free. Get a life. God bless. And on that train journey, she was so excited because she was looking forward to meeting Mary Kelly. Because they built up a good friendship, you know. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. They were on the phone. Mrs. Doyle used to go down to the pub and ask the landlord if she could use the phone. They wrote to each other. So they met up, and Mrs. Kelly, Mary Kelly, put her up in a friend's B&B, and they had little trips out together. And Mrs. Doyle hadn't had anything like this before. And then a few days later, the 2 of them took the boat over to Liverpool and the train up to Cumbria for Mrs. Doyle to meet Father Ted, Stubble, Brother Sean. And she loved the journey. She said, you know what, she said, Mrs. Kelly, they've called this country England for all the sins in China, and it's beautiful. She said, oh, it is. When she arrived at Chapel Gap in Cumbria, there was Father Ted's look-alike, with his arms outstretched, giving her a big hug. And she's saying, go on, go on, go on. Let me put the kettle on, she said, and Brother Sean said, no, Mrs. Doyle, you're going to be waited on because you've done it all your life and it's time for you to receive. Oh, but I don't know how to receive. I'm used to doing. She said, well, here you're going to learn to receive. Now I'm going to show you to your room. Make yourself comfortable, and if you want to shower, I'll show you how it works. And there's plenty of toilet rolls and tissues if you need them. Now, plenty of towels as well, so you don't have to worry. Just make yourself comfortable, and the kettle will be brewing. An hour later, Mrs. Doyle comes out and she said, oh, I'm so sorry. She said, I fell asleep on that lovely bedding. It was beautiful. And after a lovely meal, Mary and Mrs. Doyle came and sat with Brother Sean, and they held each other, they hugged one another, and there was a sense of coming home. And Mrs. Doyle said, "What do I have to do now to become a member of this lovely family?" And Mary said, "Well, you've got a 6-month probation where you can test the water. It may not be for you, pet, but you do a course, and it's called the Tree of Life course. But it's not academic, because I left school and I can't write for all the tea in China, so you've no worries there." Sure, well, I can't spell, and I wasn't taught to read nor write. So Brother Sean said, "It's not important, because I can talk to you, and you can tell me what the answers are, and we'll help you that way." Oh, she said, "That's great." So we sat down, we filled in the forms, paid the deposit for the course. But he said, "This course, it's not academic. It's a heart course, because it opens your heart to love. And it allows the messengers of God bring to you all those wonderful gifts that you have needed and will need. And it will allow you love yourself." Jesus, she said, "That's great, Mary. I haven't done that for years." And what else does the course do, Brother Sean? Well, he said, well, the first module is working with angels and understanding that there's angels everywhere. Even the animals have angels. Oh, they do. And then the second module, you sort of get in to know a little bit about this wonderful woman called Mary Magdalene. Oh, yes, I know. The church said she was a slut, didn't they, and a prostitute. And she wasn't. She was a very holy woman. She was. She was the twin flame of Jesus. And you get to know her. And she gets to know you. And then the third module, you look at Jesus, the role of Jesus, the cosmic Christ. Should I'm not into all that, but you'll help me, won't you? I said, "I will." And then the fourth module is looking at the Essenes. She said, "Who are they?" She said, "Well, Jesus was an Essene." Was he? And we all lived together before. Do you not feel that, Mrs. Doyle, that there's such an affinity with us? She said, "Jesus, I do. I feel as if I've known you all my life." Well, you have, because we've all lived together before. And we all agreed to come back to hold the light for 2012. And of course, module 5. It's creating a sacred garden, working with all the lovely colours of the angels, where you can sit and pray. And of course, module 6, it's looking at the 7 keys of Franciscan spirituality. Oh, Jesus, she said, "That sounds great." And then the last one is a 7-day quiet retreat with Brother Sean. Oh, Jesus, she said, "I've waited so much for this." And when you finish that, then they have a meeting apparently, and then they look at your work and they look at how you're doing and are you happy. Then they invite you into the novitiate for 2 years, where you live the life from your own home. So when you get sorted with digs somewhere where you can stay, you can keep your job, working as a housekeeper, and then each day structure your day so that you can have a relationship with your God. But there's no pressure on you, Mrs. Doyle. You draw up your own rule of life with support, and twice a month, Sister Joy and others will Skype you, and you'll have a get-together. And if you live near Cumbria, you'll be able to go to the monthly interfaith service days, which they have every first Sunday of the month. Oh, Jesus, she says, I might do a little bit of bacon and bring some biscuits and that. Oh, they'd love that. I'm very partial to me scones like Elsie, but nobody makes scones like me. Mrs. Doyle's scones are to die for. And then after your 2 years training, you're invited whether you wish to surrender your heart completely and live as a lay monastic from your own home. Sure, Jesus, I'm living it as it is. I don't have a boyfriend. I live a simple life, so I might as well. What have I got to lose? Do I have to have my hair shaved? Not at all, Mrs. Doyle. Do I have to wear what you're wearing? Not at all, Mrs. Doyle. All you wear is the little symbol around your neck, the Teo cross. That's lovely. It's a symbol of peace, Mrs. Doyle. Oh, she said, I've come home. After all those years, scrubbing, putting up with you know what, I've come home to my heart. Thank you, God, for not giving up on Mrs. Doyle.